Welcome, Sharon. Thank you for being here. I'm excited to talk about how EVs are changing the utility landscape. How do you see the future unfolding?
The future. Well, we know that EVs are definitely changing the transportation industry, but I feel like this is equally an energy sector transformation as well. And I think it's because electrification is utilities play such a huge role in the electrification of the grid, right? And this is going to have huge impact on it. Now, utilities may not be selling the cars, but utilities have a strategic role to play in building out the charging infrastructure and building out all of these things that will actually accelerate the adoption of electric vehicles to meet all of our electrification goals and cleaning of the grid. And when you think about it, the EV revolution is going to change how the grid works, the flow of energy, the demand curves, ways that the energy is being stored, all of these things. There's a tremendous opportunity right now for utilities to actually get in there and be that strategic driver that they should be. And it's important to remember that to get a better handle on grid behavior, utilities are really going to need to understand and influence consumer behavior. They really go together.
Completely agree. We see EVs as a huge opportunity because it presents new ways for utilities to engage their consumers, as well as offer new services, and all while being able to increase their baseload demand, increase their margin, and grid reliability, all while impacting the climate in a positive way. With that being said, it's clear that utilities now have a lot more relationships to deal with in this expanded ecosystem than they have before. What can you say about how they are managing those relationships, and are they embracing it?
Well, let's think about the players in this ecosystem, right? And we can start with automakers. And utilities can take from the playbooks of all of these players because they really just need to work with other entities now. Utilities are not operating in a silo anymore, right? And it's not just about the utilities' relationship with their customer, but it's about their relationships with all these other players as well. So Salesforce has a few automaker customers, including Ford. And I'm thinking about the Ford example because they just doubled the production of their F-150 Lightning, their electric truck, because they already know and can anticipate the demand for this product pre-launch. And because they're that in tune with their customer base, they already know like where these EVs are going to be, and like they can see the impact that this is going to create, right? And utilities would do well to be able to use that data and be proactive that way too in their planning. I mean, when you think about it, I drove over here in my Chevy Bolt, and it uses the OnStar system. So GM, which is another Salesforce customer actually, GM knows where I'm going, where I'm charging up, how much I'm charging up, the condition of my battery. These are all things that utilities would love to know as well. This is like data that they would love to get their hands on, right? And it helps with grid planning. It helps with reliability. It helps with, just balancing load and all of this. And we can't underestimate the importance of this data and the value of this data, because when you think about climate change and the pace of climate change, we cannot use old models anymore for our predictive, and planning purposes. Utilities do not have any precedent for the behavior of electric vehicles on their grids, and yet we know how much of an impact it's going to have on the grid. And so it's really good to pay attention to this. Utilities need new ways to stay on top of EV load in their territories.
And is it just the automakers, or are there other players that utilities also need to be engaging at this point for infrastructure purposes?
Well, utilities play a huge strategic role in building out the charging infrastructure. Charging infrastructure is the key bit for utilities because the charging infrastructure will actually feed adoption of electric vehicles, which is great for electrification. But it also gives utilities a lot more leverage when you're thinking about grid planning and making just a more resilient grid, right? So utilities now have to work with consumers. They need to work with property owners. They need to work with the people who are building out the charging stations. And there's like all sorts of new players now and startups in this ecosystem that the utility needs to partner with, actually, to make sure that they can balance load, manage peak demand, match generation and supply with demand, and even new opportunities with storage to be a lot more flexible. So we're talking about a lot of grid edge optimization.
It's complex too because EVs are mobile, and so they've never had to keep track of a mobile DER before, and so I think collaboration is going to be particularly key, and making sure everyone's in lockstep together as kind of we ride through this together.
For sure. And if you think about both of our platforms are very relationship based, which I think is really important for today's needs, right? Because if you have friction in relationships, that is the biggest obstacle to being able to work on these solutions together at the pace that we need to, given our climate change imperatives right now.
So how do you think utilities can benefit from the complete solution that Bidgely and Salesforce can provide together?
Well, Jordana, we together are going to pave the road to transportation electrification. We're going to drive adoption of EVs together, and we're going to accelerate the pace at which charging infrastructure can be built out. So let's think about adoption, right? I think our two platforms really help with customer experience, which is huge to the success of changing consumer behavior and adoption of these new technologies. And utilities actually have a really fantastic platform with that trusted relationship they have with their customers that we're supporting. And then when you think about accelerating just making the road less bumpy to building out all this infrastructure that we need, I think going back to that idea of a platform and a place where multiple stakeholders can be collaborating together with transparency, with trust, at speed, always being in sync. I think you need that kind of collaboration to do this very hard thing that we're trying to do, which is to transform the way our grid works and transform the way that we all use and consume energy and the way we all drive. Like, there's a lot of transformation happening here, and using our platforms to pull people together to work on these problems collaboratively is going to be key.
Bidgely is all in on the electrification journey with Salesforce, and we truly believe we're stronger together. Even though we might tackle different parts of the electrification journey, our platforms come together in this end-to-end customer engagement solution that helps influence the education for a customer to purchase an EV, to when they purchase it and they're driving, and how they can help manage the charging of that.
I love what we've already done together, Bidgely and Salesforce, because you guys have such an engaging way of personalizing those messages to customers and making it really relevant. And so I'm just wondering, like, what do you see particularly in this EV use case of us doing together?
Sure. So the way I'm envisioning this is, a utility has Marketing Cloud, one of your products, and they want to drive a personalized campaign, and they want to utilize energy insights personalized to those customers. They can drive a campaign targeted to their EV customers that have electric vehicles, and we can develop smart alerts with Bidgely Energy Insights to help educate them on time of use rates or EV rates that the utility is trying to promote, and also educate them on peak and non-peak hours of when they should be charging. And so, just pushing them along this electrification journey, educating them along the way, and helping them be a more informed energy consumer.
I love that vision that you just said, because I was thinking about ways that utilities right now are using their prime position really as an influencer of energy consumers in the area of the EV space, right? I'm thinking about like Tucson Electric Power. They're not selling cars. They're not directly building charging infrastructure. They're working with other folks to do it, but they have offered to their utility customers a lot of great educational materials on their site that I feel like this kind of personalization would really help with. So, for instance, they are offering residential customers, mass market customers, EV comparisons, so that if you're trying to make a decision on whether to not have your ICE vehicle anymore and buy an EV, you can start comparing based on your driving habits and your electrical usage, just like what the different costs to you would be as a consumer for switching to an electric vehicle. They're helping their C&I customers make that ROI calculation for their fleets, like how soon can I recoup the ROI on investing in an all-electric fleet, right? They're working with schools in their territory to install charging stations at school parking lots and, connect that with like solar on site and so kind of like mini DERs and microgrids. And so Tucson Electric Power isn't selling the EVs or anything, but they're really leveraging this trusted relationship that they have. Because I think consumers still trust their utilities the highest when it comes to, providing them with expertise and training and knowledge about their energy consumption. And so EV is a really natural place to do that as well.
At the end of the day, too, right? When someone's purchasing an electric vehicle, they're going to look to the automakers, right? But they're also going to be charging it at home, so that's going to impact their energy bill. And they're going to want to know how that's going to impact their energy bill. Here comes the utility's role in helping educate me as a customer on what that impact is going to look like, similar to a time of use rate, but it's going to be an electric vehicle. And I have no idea what that's going to cost me. So it's kind of, I will look to them and to help educate me on what those projected costs will be, what those savings might be if I switch over.
Absolutely.
Do you have any prime examples of how Salesforce has helped a utility realize this opportunity?
Well, we've been talking about how this is kind of a new paradigm for utilities, and we need new data sets. We just need new ways of thinking and new ways of working with new people. So I have this example from National Grid, which is more on the solar and renewable side, that I think is really relevant because we're talking about all of the changes that you have to think about when you're moving to cloud, when you're using a ton more data, and when you're trying to automate processes to make it a lot easier for more people to engage in your solution, right? So National Grid in the UK, they had this great opportunity because a lot more renewables were coming online, and they wanted to bring them on as fast as possible to really get to their decarbonization goals, right? So when all of the solar, wind, and storage, battery resources were cleared to come onto the grid, National Grid saw a 4-fold increase in applications for connections, which is great. But unfortunately, all of their processes and systems were based on the old way of bringing on traditional fossil fuel generation. So they had their engineering specifications and all of their application requirements were really complex and cumbersome and appropriate for bringing on a nuclear power plant, which how often do you do that, right? Versus trying to bring on a DER or community solar or something like that, which is like, you might have 4 or 5 a day applications for something like that, right? So that system just wasn't working. So on the Salesforce platform, they were actually able to have this collaborative process that we've been talking about that's a lot more agile. They created this portal called Connect Now. With this portal, they were able to really streamline that application process and the review process, engineering. And they developed it in a really agile way, like really working with stakeholders to just automate processes that could be automated and digitize and do all of this kind of digital transformation that is the great foundation and underpinning of like truly a lot more collaboration and trust. And this portal now is handling most of their connection requests now, and at a really fast pace. It's very transparent. It's super efficient. It's very trustworthy and reliable. They handled a lot of the data transfer. I mean, it's very complex, but that's what digitalization can help with, I think. So again, I'm bringing up the National Grid example, not just because it's a great example about how utilities are embracing the energy transition, but also because this is the way that utilities need to be thinking about electric vehicles and the opportunities that lie there for utilities. Digital, cloud, data-driven, and above all, consumer-centric. And then let's think about this customer experience aspect as well, which both of us are all about, right? Utilities can really learn from the startup companies that are working on trying to accelerate EV adoption and, trying to expand the build out of charging infrastructure to support that adoption. Salesforce also works with startup companies like EVBox and other companies where they are using our platform to create a great customer experience for not just EV buyers who want to try to, understand what they're getting into and what are the advantages of adopting an electric vehicle, but also working with all the stakeholders who are trying to build out charging infrastructure, right? So like your grocery store or your school or other property owners who need to be part of that system. And so they're creating a great experience for people who want to like join in on this and be co-creators of the new EV world that we're trying to build.
What must utilities do now to take full advantage of this EV revolution? At Bidgely, we like to say that utilities need to catch the EV wave. Otherwise, they're going to be left spectating. And if you're left spectating, you're going to be certainly caught up unprepared.
Well, yeah, it is happening now. I mean, we have a lot of great examples. And why don't I just share like what's actually happening now instead of just, it's not all vision anymore. I can think of a few areas. One is with billing. Another is with bundling. Another one is with creating partner portals and ecosystems like I was talking about before. And then another one is the kind of customer education that we have already talked about as well. So let's talk about billing. I mean, this is already happening. We have a city in Asia that we're working with right now who wants to roll out charging stations all throughout their metro area, but they want to link payments for those stations to everyone's electricity bill. And we're seeing this a lot actually in the United States as well, where regulated utilities really want to be able to link utility bill with EV charging bills for all sorts of reasons, like, just also for ease of payment, right? But it also helps them with tracking, but you can offer incentives like the kind that you were talking about. There's like all sorts of advantages to that. So just at the basic level, the billing level, that's a great match and marry. And we're also seeing some really interesting things with bundling too. This is also happening more in Asia, where they are bundling their electricity bill with EV bills, but also with like mobile and internet connections, solar, and even insurance. So they're bundling a lot more things into a customer's experience because they're seeing that all of this is sort of tied together, right? And that's often like when you go to finance your car, right? Like that's all kind of part of the same experience too. And so they're trying to think about things differently over there. And not only that, but like when you talk about EVs and electric mobility, we're not just talking about cars. So in Asia, they're tracking things like scooters, electric bikes, even farm equipment that's been electrified, as well as these fleets. So I think they're really trying to think more holistically and comprehensively about what that value proposition is for that consumer and these bill transactions, right? And engaging them.
So I'd like to just expand on the billing piece. To date, nobody knows how much they're spending on their electric vehicles. They don't understand how that impacts their bill and kind of what's that line item in their bill. To date, Bidgely is the only company that we're able to use our patented algorithms around EV detection and consumption to be able to parse out that end use within the home and then also be able to attribute a monetary number for the consumer to basically understand kind of what that bill item is.
Yeah, I love the transparency that the Bidgely interface actually gives to us as consumers. We also need that transparency for all the partners, right, who are building this, the charging infrastructure with us. So thinking about ways that like startups like EVBox or Move Mobility are using our platforms to make it super easy for like if you want to offer up your property as a place for a charging station, like how does that application go, and giving utilities insight into like how that is going to change their load factor in a specific area. Like all of this transparency is going to be really valuable for everyone who's trying to build out the charging infrastructure, and it's really essential for utilities to stay at the center of that, because they're the ones who are going to have to, they're balancing the load, right? They're maybe taking advantage of some storage and opportunities, and they want some insight into that peak load. So utilities are trying to optimize the grid, and this is a great way to do it, actually, where everyone who is either contributing or taking and consuming, or even like just maintaining the infrastructure, right, can see what each other's doing and stay in sync.
Bidgely is definitely hearing utilities ask for more data around EVs, since all of these different partners and companies have access to various pieces of this data, where they're interested in understanding the who, the what, when, where, who has an EV, when are they charging, what are they using to charge, is it level 1, is it level 2, where are they charging it, because it has grid impacts, right? So all of these different things they're trying to get access to, and Bidgely has a really broad solution here, and we're able to kind of get the consumption data and provide visibility on many of these fronts. And so I think, over time, we can provide this kind of 360 view into the electric vehicle market, especially for utilities on their territory, so that even if a customer is calling into the call center and they're using Service Cloud and they want to have access, to, why their bill is high, or is their electric vehicle on, how much does their electric vehicle cost, a utility agent can actually respond to that. So we're going to start to see these insights and analytics a lot more. There's so much opportunity here.
There absolutely is. We are all trying to do new things, unprecedented things. We're working with a ton of data, so like we're doing really complex things. We're doing this digitally. We're making new systems. So it's an incredible time right now to be working on this. I've been reading during the pandemic, getting a lot more reflective about what it means to prepare for the future. And there's this great quote from Shalonda Baker, who is the Deputy Director of Energy Justice right now at the U.S. Department of Energy. And she has this great quote. She says, "The current system is not accidental. So we can actually choose to redesign this system in light of our current climate change stress factors, right? And what we see coming." Bidgely and Salesforce, we work with utilities on that intimate customer relationship, right? And so we can really use this opportunity to weave in our human need for just well-being, health, resiliency, for this future that we're looking at. And I know that both Bidgely and Salesforce are part of this group called the Equity in a Clean Energy Economy Collaborative. I've seen some amazing things coming out of this group where utilities like Excel and their partners like EV Noir are really listening to frontline communities and using that knowledge and insight to inform the design of things like where they're going to put charging stations, how they'll engage communities, how they can design EV incentives and purchasing incentives, how they're going to design electrified car sharing opportunities. And the reason I want to talk about that is that these communities, if we need to transition quickly, we need to transition fully, we need to transition justly, and the electric vehicle sector is really a great place to be able to pull all of those values in together. And we need for this to work for the bulk of our society if we're going to make that transition.
I agree. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Always a pleasure to be with you guys.
What an amazing way to finish off our day today, focused on electric vehicles. Now I'm with Sharon to talk a bit about her experience and what Salesforce can provide to this landscape. So we'll start off, Sharon, with what kind of consumer education tactics or content are making a difference in consumer adoption of electric vehicles?
Oh my gosh, I feel like I shouldn't answer that question because we've already heard today from amazing experts. So I'm going to tell all the viewers here, go back, if you missed the episodes from before, go back, listen to Austin Energy. That was amazing. Florida Power and Light, NextEra. Also, I think Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative has been on in days prior. They have some amazing webinars as well, where they interviewed Austin Energy and Great River Energy, doing some really like innovative things to inspire customers to get excited about EVs and to adopt more EVs and to feel good about their range anxiety. I think there was a lot of good stuff we saw today about just how easy it is to show people, just to alleviate people's anxieties about this kind of new technology. So go look at the other episodes.
Awesome shout out. Today was so fun and amazing speakers, phenomenal. I'm going to rewatch personally, but maybe, so you actually mentioned Jason's session from yesterday from Smart Energy Consumer Collaborative. And, he mentioned how EVs actually present this awesome opportunity for utilities to really engage and build trust with their customers. So maybe can you mention a bit about how Salesforce applications can help utilities do just that?
That brings me back to this idea about personalization, which I think is a key part of both of our platforms, and which is why I think that our partnership, Digitally and Salesforce, is such a juggernaut, of talent, right, and solutions. So personalization based on customer attributes is so important, because whether you're a car dealer or a charging network or a utility, you are selling a whole dream and a lifestyle. And we all need to be telling a beautiful story about our clean energy future now, all of us, right? So how does that relate to transportation, electrification, and EVs? Well, for new customer acquisition or vehicle purchases, utilities and Digitally actually use our platform for data integration, analytics, and AI to help pull in all this contextual data about customers, like their shopping, dining, and entertainment likes and dislikes. And all of this helps you to match the right message and offer to your customer profiles. And hopefully you've done some good homework on, how you want to reach those profiles and what motivates them. For cross-selling and upselling, there is usage and behavioral data about the customer's charging patterns, their times and locations, and when they charge and where, who else in the family is using the car, what are other constraints that they are facing. They're in a multi-tenant building and they don't always have access, right? So there's a lot of data that will help you to offer better rates and educate your customers about new features or about your network expansions. Back to that idea of communicating about that there's infrastructure to support this choice that you as an individual are making. So we heard a lot from FPL and Con Ed today on that very topic about how this not only pulls in customers as your partners, but it also helps you manage load on the grid. And it's like a whole new relationship that you have with your customers. And this kind of data also helps you to create loyalty with perks and reward points. We have a cloud that we offer here at Salesforce called Loyalty Cloud. And there's this whole team of behavioral scientists, PhDs here at Salesforce who obsess on what motivates and inspires customers to come back and engage with products and services. So it's actually amazing how this insight can change not just individual behavior, but like a whole consumer culture. So, again, you saw some utilities talking about that today, using these fresh tactics to reach consumers. So maybe to inspire your thinking, you can actually go to salesforce.com and download some of our reports. We do a yearly huge comprehensive marketing survey about consumer behavior that gives you a lot of insights that might be able to spark your creativity in this area. And I also want to say that the reason for using a platform, it's a CRM, but it's really like a full service and sales and loyalty engagement platform, right? So one of the things is being able to help you engage these other platforms where consumers are. So engagement on social media is hugely helpful
in normalizing EV adoption, right? So making it easy for customers to consume and share EV information and education on their social networks. So as much as possible, I think it's important to engage customers themselves to be your biggest promoters, right? Some examples of some messages that are personalized and that can reinforce that kind of peer-to-peer advocacy are things like, we've launched 3 new charger locations near you or near your favorite coffee shop or whatever, right? Or helpful tips for maximizing your time at the charger. I think it'd be interesting for customers to know that it's to save your battery, that first 80%, that Carl was talking, that first 80% is going to be fast charging, and then it slows down to a slow trickle. So it's good for you and for all the people waiting in line for you to, follow that little prompt on your app, right? There's driving techniques, right? To increase your mileage per charge. You can give personalized information like that. You can add a friend or another user to your account because a lot of people share their cars, right? Or you could refer a friend and then maybe get a credit for that. And that kind of expands usage too. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this great data to personalize these messages and then make your customers yourselves your best peer promoters to get more people on board with this.
Completely agree. And I love so much about what you're saying, Sharon, because it really highlights the strong relationship of Bitchly and Salesforce and how much we focus on that personalization and together can make such an impact.
I think I was literally thinking about that demo that you just did a few minutes ago when I was going through that list. These are all excellent things to do. No, we need so much data. We need so much data, integration, analytics. That's all the stuff that our platforms help you take care of. Because I think it was the guy from FPL who said, utility, this is not our wheelhouse. We're not app experts and we're not going to do this. But yeah.
Exactly. No, I think that's such a great highlight. And, maybe one thing for those of you who don't know, Bitchly and Salesforce have an awesome integration together and can really, supercharge your customer interactions. But maybe could you share a little bit about beyond EV? What does Salesforce offer to utilities?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of things converge at utilities, right? Where before they were trying to tackle problems in different silos within their organizations, right? But now they're looking more at, we talk a lot about customer 360, and I think there's also a thing that we should think about called employee 360, right? So Bitchly does an amazing job of getting all this personalized insight around customers and putting it all together and serving that up to customers so they get this great coherent picture, right, of their and they have a coherent experience themselves with the utility. But we have to do the same thing on the utility side, that every utility employee in any department now is a customer service agent when you think about it, right? Because everyone has to be customer centric now at utilities to be able to, for the utility to provide this kind of value to customers. And so we need that same kind of 360, offered to the employees so that the utility employee experience can support all this amazing personalized insight that a Bitchly can serve up, right? So when you think about, I'm thinking about 3 areas. One is the area of field service. Another is aligning various utility program teams around customers. We heard from the woman at Con Ed today who was talking about their EE and DSM programs, and that is all converging too. And then I'm also thinking about everyone has shared about how equity and just being able to serve low-income customers is of prime importance to them. And in all 3 of these areas, we're seeing our product be able to do the kind of unsiloing, both of just physical unsiloing of data, but also of culture and processes at utilities. So in the area of field service, right? So before you had your contact center, they have maybe access into some of that Bitchly insight that we have in our joint contact center console, right? Which is great. But do your dispatchers have that same kind of insight, about that they need about that customer and their location and, their particular needs or what rate they're on or, what assets they have, right? Do your technicians have like contextual insight as well? Do your third-party technicians and contracted, technicians also have that insight too, so that everyone along the line is giving the customer that seamless experience that is very personalized, where the customer feels known, they don't have to repeat their story every time, and also, so just like within the utility operations, right? Everyone is all aligned and there's like quick handoffs, and you can trust that what you've done for that customer, someone else will carry through to the end. Same goes with like aligning your program teams around customers. So sometimes you have different programs all working with the same customer, right? There might be an EE program, and then they're also on some other, rate, special charging rate. And then they might also be trying to sign up for like solar services. And so you want all of that to be a coherent experience for the customer, which means that behind the scenes at the utility, they all should know the same things about the customer, right? So you're integrating your program staff, your contact center, your billing teams, EE and DSM programs, your DER program, like all of these people need to be sort of aligned and reorganized around that central customer data.
We're actually out of time, but thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much for all of your insight. This has been so informative. You are an expert, so it's been wonderful having you. And for everyone else, that's a wrap for today, but please join us for workshops tomorrow. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's where, we're all going to get to talk to each other. So we'll see you tomorrow. Have a lovely evening.
Thanks, everyone.